Facts are stubborn things, but statistics are pliable. Mark Twain. Today we are speaking about divorce. For a while now, I have been hearing that marriages in the United States have a 50-50 chance of surviving. In fact, not only in the United States. I mostly hear the phrase, half of marriages end in divorce. Today, I'm going to tell you why this inflated figure is a myth. Growing up, I can't tell you I knew many people whose parents were divorced. It was rare. I do come from a biased background, of course. My very Catholic Opus Dei all-girls school only accepted students, specifically girls, whose parents were married at the time of admission. So whole marriages were pretty common, if not the most common type of marriage during my childhood. Some people might have a problem with this school policy, but it is what it is. It was a Catholic school after all, and they wanted to foster a certain kind of environment. At the same time, my parents have a happy marriage, my uncles and aunts, for the most part, my grandparents as well. I only know of one person in my family that has gotten a divorce. So in my mind, divorce was rare. Now fast forward to being exposed to social media, US, university system, etc. I come to see that I cannot just assume that my classmates' parents are married. I had to learn to be more delicate around the topic. Then I hear about the 50% divorce statistic. Seems high, to say the least. I put it on my back burner for a while until it started to be a huge part of the conversation of where the culture is going. The importance of family, the importance of relationships, etc. And to be honest, I understand the need from conservatives to say that marriage is in trouble, that we should do better to save marriages, to keep couples married. But simultaneously, that number is being used to discourage people from getting married. So I started to ask about the specifics of the 50% statistic. Turns out the number isn't quite as fixed or as high. I always assumed in passing that the way you measured divorce statistics was to measure the couples who got married and then count how many of them had gotten divorced. Turns out it's nothing like that. It is more like they count how many couples get married in 1 year and how many couples get divorced that same year. What if less people are getting married this year, this generation, but those couples stand the test of time? Yeah, the people who were married before and who are getting divorced today will count as a negative to the number of divorce from those couples getting married now, if that makes sense. So let's do a crazy example that would never exist in reality. But imagine that 50 people get divorced in 1 year. That same year, 100 couples get married. Now it doesn't matter that those 100 couples stay together for life, the divorce statistic will still be 50%. More realistically, in 2006, the marriage rate was 6.9 out of 1,000 people. The marriage rate was 6.9 out of 1,000 people in the United States, and the divorce rate was 3.2 out of 1,000 people. So if you divide 3.2 by 6.9, you get 46.3% of marriages ending in divorce. That's almost half, but that's just not quite right. The reality is that peak divorce rate was 41% for people who married 35 years ago, but it's been falling ever since. It's been falling ever since the 1980s. The thing is that dividing the annual divorce rate by the annual marriage rate is kind of useless. You are not getting any sense of how divorce rate changes across generations and demographics, which is a way better way to understand how divorce rates are trending. So measured that way, according to data from the University of Michigan economist Justin Wolfers, approximately 65% of marriages that began in the 1970s and 1980s made it to the 15th anniversary, making a divorce rate of 35% for those generations. Based on the same data, 70% of marriages of couples who married in the 1990s reached their 15th anniversary, for a divorce rate of 30%. And the divorce rate for people who married in the 2000s, the divorce rate would be even lower at 15% for couples who reached their 15th anniversary. And we're not even factoring in geography and demographics. If you live in Iowa, for example, you have a lower chance of getting divorced than if you live in Nevada. Some states have a divorce percentage more than double some other states. The UK has a lower divorce rate than the US, surprisingly, honestly. But the US has a lower divorce rate than China, Russia, and many Eastern European countries. Then we have demographics. For example, interracial marriages actually have a 41% chance of divorce versus 31% chance for couples who marry within their own group. This according to a Pew Research study. Please don't be mad. Don't be mad. Other studies have shown a smaller difference, but still slightly higher in interracial couples. Then, for whatever reason, Black women have more of a chance to get divorced, almost double that of white women. Not sure why that is, but that's just the numbers. Then we have second marriages, which have a 60% chance of divorce. And then third marriages, 73% chance of divorce. You see where I'm going? Not only is the 50% divorce statistic false, even the 41% should be presented with an asterisk because they're measuring all these people together. All these marriages between different demographics, different socioeconomic groups, different amount of marriages, they're measuring them together. All the divorces of different demographics, ages, racial groups, and second marriages are being factored in. The 50% figure is actually a relic from the 1980s of a prediction that was made when divorce skyrocketed to the 40th. So what happened just before that? Why did divorce skyrocket? Major feminist movement, the sexual liberation movement, the women's liberation movement. That might have something to do with it. And also the no-fault divorce introduced by Ronald Reagan, which, by the way, he later said it was one of the biggest mistakes of his political life. Now, just because the divorce rate has gone down since the 1980s does not mean that I don't think that it's still high. It's high. I still think there's work to do. But I do think that the 50% is used as fear-mongering to prevent people from getting married in the first place. So there's a quote I found from a Quartz article. It says, despite the paucity of good data and arguments over statistical calculations, most social scientists and demographers would agree that divorce rates are declining or stable, that a 50% divorce rate has not yet come to pass, and that young couples today are so far on course to have fewer divorces than their parents' generation. I do think that people shouldn't just get married for no reason, or that they shouldn't think about it thoroughly. You should make a conscious decision. You should also put in your part, 100% each. Dr. Rose M. Kreider, a demographer and fertility and family statistics branch of the Census Bureau, that was a mouthful, she told the New York Times in 2005 that, quote, at this point, unless there's some kind of turnaround, I wouldn't expect any cohort to reach 50% since none already has, unquote. So this Quartz article, which I will link below, makes a point to say that the reason this 50% figure still persists, it's because it feeds the narrative of different political groups. Conservatives want a number which captures how dire the situation is. I get it, totally get it. Personally, consider myself a conservative, but I think perpetuating that myth is actually going to put people in a mindset that they have this huge chance of getting divorced, and sometimes what you put attention to comes through, right? And at the same time, people are more scared to get married in the first place. So it does more damage to our value system and what we want for society, right? Then we have the leftists or liberals who want to believe that divorce is a necessary evil, and they would like it to be higher so that they could use the figure to show that marriage is not worth it, to declare that marriage is unnecessary, and that people cannot possibly be happy in a situation like that. They often say 50% of marriages end in divorce, and even more people are in an unhappy marriage. In the words of Scottish poet Andrew Lang, statistics get used much like a drunk uses a lamppost for support, not illumination. So guys, I hope I reached my goal of breaking down why this 50% figure and the half of marriages end in divorce isn't quite the case. I do still think that there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to marriages, that virtually none should be ending in divorce, preferably. But the fear-mongering tactic shouldn't be used anymore, especially by conservatives. I will see you next week.